There is no question Black culture is the most appropriated culture in the world. So that's what this video is going to deal with. We're going to deal with appropriation. And so we're going to explore an area where many people may not know that is being appropriated, but we're going to set the record straight. You know, we heard so much about certain Mexicans trying to say that the Crip Walk comes from Mexicans. Y'all remember when John Leguizamo said the Crip Walk comes from Chicano culture, but Black people made it funkier and national. Now, in case you didn't know, our culture is consistently and constantly under attack. There's so many groups trying to take credit for the things that we created, right? Now, this is from a 1958 film. Listen to the music, it's jazz, right? Now, this young man right here, Mexican-American young man, actually, you have Mexicans actually saying that he was an inspiration for Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk. This is real. People are actually saying this. Well, I guess you only know what you know. I guess someone forgot to tell the Mexicans that Bill Bailey did the moonwalk 13 years earlier. We are indeed the innovators. Let's keep it real. What's up, everybody? Listen, most of you already know what I do for the most part on this channel. Now, while it's true, most of my focus is on hip hop, but I do cover other topics related to Black American culture. Now, when I think about stepping and strolling, right, I immediately think about HBCUs. Most of us recognize it as a Black American art form. It is so popular at most colleges and universities that it wouldn't be uncommon to find people of all ethnic and racial groups that have adopted this practice to their own college experiences. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, that mediocrity pays to greatness. However, imitation can sometimes look like appropriation. Now, I'm not saying you can't do something that's associated with another culture. I'm just simply saying you should be respectful about its origins. Recently, I did a video featuring this dance historian whose name is Marcel Durton. And in that video, he mentioned something about showing reverence to the people who ultimately inspired you. For me, I can see so many parallels with regard to hip hop and stepping. Both have African American roots. And in some cases, you will see certain Latinos who are very slow to acknowledge that reality. So as you probably have guessed by now, you're watching Latino fraternities and sororities stepping. I found a very interesting article penned by this Latino fraternity, which talks about the history of stepping. And it was very disturbing, to say the least. But before I get to that particular article, let me remind you of stepping's history. Then we will break down this particular article after that.
The history and culture of stepping. It started in the early 1900s by African American college students. At the time, there was a lot of social and political unrest. So stepping honestly was just a form of like speaking up, expressing yourself, as well as feeling connected with people around you. There were organizations called fraternities and sororities. And within these organizations, they would do tons of stuff. They would do community service. They would do activities that uplift one another, and they would come together and step. African Americans were not allowed to go to universities, or predominantly white universities, so they created their own. And on these campuses, they created their own communities. They created their own families. They shared in knowledge and uplifting one another. So fraternities and sororities were not just about stepping and dancing and making moves, but it was about empowerment and confidence and feeling connected and creating a community that accepts you as you are and allows you to express yourself however you would like to express yourself.
The Negro Act of 1740.
What did that Negro Act of 1740 prohibit?
Africans could no longer learn to read. They could no longer learn to write. They could not wear clothing above their stature. And Africans lost the right to use the drum. The drum was made an illegal weapon, if you will.
The drum?
The drum.
Was made illegal?
Made illegal.
Silenced in an effort to keep the Africans from communicating and organizing. Just imagine how devastating it was to lose their social network.
So if you were to take phones or Facebook or any social media platform away from the masses, people would be at a pause. They wouldn't know what to do, similar to the way that the drums were taken away. They had to regroup and figure out something else.
That something else was a way to keep the beat alive, using their own bodies as instruments.
So these are one of the first workings of this inward percussive element. And so
They took the drums away.
Right, they took them away, but we still found ways to put them inside of everything we did as well.
The beat.
Yes, yes.
The beat never stopped. It pulsed through the ring shout, first performed in black churches of the Sea Islands, later to the hambone and the juba. It's echoed in tap dancing, even in today's beatboxing. And in the precision of stepping, the percussive dance tradition of historically black fraternities and sororities. To these artists, the Stoner Rebellion and the colonists' fierce retribution marked the moment when the enslaved Africans created a new culture in America.
It laid the foundation of what would become African Americans and African American culture.
All right, let's get into this article. This is from the Lambda Sigma Upsilon Taino chapter. Let's get to it. Stepping and strolling. The history of stepping dates back to the times of the indigenous Caribbean and African tribes. It is known that these cultures would usually step dance at festivals, feasts, celebrations, and ceremonies. Centuries later, when the African and the Caribbean natives were invaded and enslaved by the conquistadors, slaves were prohibited by their masters from communicating in their own language for fear that they would be plotting their escape. Stepping, making beats with one's hands and feet became one of the only forms of communication that the slaves had. Just within a few sentences into this article, we can clearly see what the agenda is. This fraternity wants to point to Africa and the Caribbean for the origins of stepping. You might ask, well, why would they do this? See, I'm of the opinion that certain groups are simply tired of realizing just about everything that they like in America somehow is tied to Black American creation. They simply want to look elsewhere for their inspiration. Now, I've already showed you the history of stepping and strolling. There is no way that Latino students aren't aware of that history. So by linking stepping to Africa, they can use their African diaspora card, that's what I call it, to sidestep acknowledging Black Americans. If they convince themselves that it comes from Africa or from indigenous people, then they can free themselves from the charge of appropriation. Now you might ask, where did they get this African narrative from? You might be surprised. All you got to do is Google the origins of stepping. In addition to pinpointing or pointing to stepping's creation for Black American college students in the early 1900s, it also mentions the gumboot dance. What is the gumboot dance? Well, the gumboot dance comes from South Africa.
Gumboot dance started in the mines in Johannesburg back in the 1950s, where the migrant laborers met to work. Obviously, all of them were coming from different southern parts of Africa, from different cultural backgrounds, speaking different languages, and they then needed to come up with a means of expressing themselves, not just amongst each other, but also against the system that was oppressing them. So this language or this dance style then started as a means of them sometimes warning each other that, hey, watch out, he is coming. But also then grew into this creative outlet and a means of them just exchanging the energy, the different cultures, and this new language was then born.
It is part of our culture. The rhythm of gumboots has got into our blood, I suppose you could say. In 2005, when we launched and registered the Shosholoza brand, we didn't realize how far it would go, and where it's gone into Africa and where it's gone around the world, and just the meaning behind that, the movement of the arms of a steam train, that movement of the wheels, you know, as the arms push the wheels. There was the dance that the guys were doing on the mines and singing the Shosholoza song. But that's become like the culture of this Neptune Good manufacturing plant, where it's gone under our skin.
With gumboot dance being this vibrant, energetic dance form, then you can't help but want to know more about it. So they started talking more about it, they started recreating it, they started developing it further. And obviously the world then caught up with this vibe that is now happening in Southern Africa, and gumboot dance then really became this new language that everyone all over the world was just fascinated.
Now, this reference to gumboot dance is problematic. The birth of this dance happened around 1948, 1950, thereabouts. Now, how is it possible for a dance that surfaced many years after stepping was already created in America be the influence for stepping in America? That doesn't make any sense. But despite that obvious inconvenient fact, people choose to avoid that. And so they continue to misrepresent the origins of stepping. Now, don't get me wrong. You all should know by now, I do not have anything against Africa. I'm simply trying to understand, why is it whenever Black Americans create something, some people try to connect it to Africa? Clearly, in this case of stepping, that is not true. Recently, I did a video about South African musicians adopting Black American jazz. If we consider the history, we can logically suggest that gumboot dancing could have incorporated elements of Black American stepping, considering how similar they look. All right, let's continue. Now, here they mention us, the Black sororities and fraternities. So clearly they understood the history. So I don't know what prompted them to try to rewrite the history. But listen to this. Black fraternities and sororities introduced a modern tradition of stepping or stomping the yard around the time of the Civil Rights Movement. It evolved from Greek signs that were popular amongst fraternities during the early 1900s and were performed as a way of showing pride for the organization. Strolling also became popularized by the historical Black organizations during the early 20th century, when members would dance synchronous with other pledge classmates or line brothers as a way of reflecting their pledge class unity. Lambda Sigma Upsilon is the first Latino-based fraternity to promote the art of stepping and strolling. To us, listen to this, to us, it is historically and culturally relevant and allows us to pay homage to our indigenous and African ancestry. Our performance provide a forum for the community to better understand the unique history and traditions of our culturally rooted brotherhood. Now, this is what I think what this fraternity tried to do. At the same time, acknowledging the Black fraternities and sororities, they're trying to tell you that, hey, Africa and the Tainos were first. Now, for those of you who may not know the history of Taino natives, it's been widely documented that the Taino natives are, in fact, extinct. For hundreds of years, Puerto Ricans did not practice any ceremonial traditions related to the indigenous people of those islands. It has only been at least 50 years or so that there has been a rediscovery of this heritage. So, listen. So, in an attempt to reconnect to that culture, they had to assemble certain indigenous customs from other native people in order to create a new Taino culture in Puerto Rico. If stepping has its origin in Taino culture, they should have a historical name for it. They do not. This whole narrative and this whole article is completely made up. So what I'm doing, I'm asking responsible Puerto Ricans who have access to this fraternity to contact them and tell them to remove this article from their webpage. I contend that the majority of these claims offered in this article are completely false. Now, if you want respect, you must give respect. Rewriting our history is unacceptable. When you say stepping comes from Africa or Taino culture, what you're saying is we didn't do what we said we did. It's basically a form of erasure. So let's get the history right. That's all I ask. If this is your first time, welcome. Subscribe. I would love to have you. Thumb up that video. Please thumb up the video. And please, please, please share. This information is so important. Until the next time, peace.
Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson, a visionary, scientist, educator, and public policy innovator, has broken barriers and blazed trails throughout her life. She was the first Black woman to earn a doctorate at MIT. Her breakthrough scientific research has aided innovations for several technologies we use today, such as the touchtone phone, fiber optic and solar cells, and the fax machine, just to name a few. During her tenure at Bell Labs, Dr. Jackson researched theoretical, quantum, and optical physics. Her two leading studies led to advances in telecommunication tech like caller ID, a feature that has given people the opportunity to screen unknown or unwanted phone calls, and call waiting, a feature that notifies people of a new incoming call while on another call. Both technologies have enhanced how everyone across the globe communicates. Dr. Jackson is also a strong advocate of diversity, not only in technology and the sciences, but also at the corporate executive level and in boardrooms for high-profile companies.